And hello everybody, you're very welcome to a new On Location from RSA Conference. This is Sean Martin, where I get to talk with lots of cool people about cool innovations. This year's theme is the art of possible. And I think sometimes we forget what we're aiming for, which is to make business possible, not to enable security teams. The security is there to help enable the business. And what's a big driver of business? Data. Of course, our systems have changed and shifted and morphed over time. Data's stayed pretty consistent, and it's a very important part of what business relies upon. And Vishal Gupta, thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about what it means to protect data in this new world of technology lives everywhere.
Super easy.
Everywhere than where we used to live 10 years ago. So, first few words about who you are, Vishal, and what you're up to.
I'm one of the founders of Seclore, and the agenda is to make sure that security and collaboration don't become mutually exclusive goals. So they're not competing with each other, and that CISOs and security teams become popular within the organization.
Perfect. Well said. That's it. We're done.
All right.
No, in all seriousness, as we were talking earlier, things have changed, right? Mm-hmm. Mobile phones are personal, the perimeters fading away, if not non-existent at this point.
Yep.
Stuff's moved to the cloud, stuff's moved back on-prem, yet still we rely heavily on our data. So paint a picture of kind of the state of the world now in terms of the technology stack and how businesses are operating, mm-hmm. and perhaps where things might be left a little exposed where they shouldn't be.
I think enterprise focus for the last many decades has been around protecting infrastructure, right, which is devices, networks, applications, and the likes. And the challenge with all of this, protecting all of this infrastructure, is that you just cannot do enough of it. So data is moving across all devices, it's moving across all networks, all applications, and it's also moving to things or stuff, infrastructure that the enterprise cannot monitor or control. Right? So personal devices, for example, public networks like RSA, here everybody's using a public network. Applications have all moved to the cloud and so on. And for the enterprise, it's become a little bit of a data chase. It's almost like the enterprise are constantly following the data, and everywhere the data goes, the enterprise wants to control it. Personal devices, cloud applications, public networks, third parties, and so on. And it's impossible. You just cannot chase the data enough and secure the spots where the data lands up. So I think that's a big challenge for the enterprise. And our insight at the time we were starting Seclore was that the only way to protect data is to protect data. I know it's a self-referential statement, but it's true. There is no amount of infrastructure security that will mean data security.
Why do they compromise systems? Yet maybe they want to take down the system for denial of service, but ultimately it's about the data.
Absolutely.
So wherever it is. So talk to me about how this reality impacts how teams operate. If they're constantly buying technologies and putting policies and controls in place, chasing this data, mm-hmm. where are they missing the mark? It's
just not possible. So enterprises are realizing, teams are realizing that they just cannot get policy uniformity across devices, networks, applications, employees, third parties, and so on. Unless they change the game. The rules of the game change, and the only thing that they really care about is data. So there are a lot of examples where data security actually replaces infrastructure security. We have a lot of financial services companies who have been able to completely dismantle their VPN infrastructure, because now the data that they're sending over the network is protected, and therefore the need to protect or control the network itself goes away, for example.
Interesting, okay.
There are lots of enterprises who've been able to do away with personal device control, MDM kind of technologies, because they realize that they don't really care about the device. Right? They only care about the enterprise data going to that personal device.
Because there'll always be a hole, right?
There's always a hole.
There's always an open end somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
That slips through the policy cracks, right?
And the other option is to stop the data from going. But as I always say, if you stop data from flowing, it's like water, right? It starts stinking, right? So it has to constantly flow for it to be useful.
And it doesn't flow where you think it's flowing.
Exactly. Right. It flows in all the wrong places.
The water's coming out of that plug, but that's not where it's coming in.
Yes. So yeah.
All right. Interesting. So how does what Seclore does help with this?
What Seclore is doing is we've created a mechanism by which security, privacy, compliance, observability, everything can be built into the data itself. So consider it like a firewall around a piece of data. Right. So the simplest example I can give you is I send you a document via email. Right. Something which happens maybe trillions of times every day. Right. Now what Seclore has done is that you take the document or the email and you put a firewall around it, and the firewall has certain rules. Who can access it? What can each of these people do with that document or email? How long can they continue to use it? From where can they use it? What is the purpose? And so on. So for example, I can send you a document and say, Sean can view and edit and respond back to me, but not forward and copy and print.
Okay.
And at the end of 3 days, I don't like you anymore. I do like you.
Right.
But,
I hope so.
But at the end of 3 days, if I don't like
you, can like me, but not trust me.
Zero trust. But at the end of 3 days, I can press a button and make all copies of the data vanish for you. Right. So the capability to make data collaboration or sharing reflect real world relationships. Like you can recall data back, you can stop data from being misused while continuing to encourage data being used. And making that distinction very clearly that if you respond back to me, that's good, but if you forward it to somebody else, that's bad. Right? That's the distinction between use and misuse.
So how do teams kind of, because I see a few things here, and I want your view of how this happens. Mm-hmm. So I need to shift from infrastructure protection, and I need to shift to data protection.
Right.
And I say those separately because I think there's two different things: skill sets and how you build programs and all that. So how do you help organizations make that transition?
So there are a couple of unique challenges that come with data. If you're trying to protect infrastructure, right? So for example, if you're trying to protect devices, there is a finite countable number of devices in enterprise. If an enterprise has 10,000 employees, then maybe it is dealing with 20,000 devices, right? Maybe. But when it comes to data, it's uncountable. An enterprise of 10,000 employees will typically be dealing with billions of pieces of data, trillions sometimes, right? So the first challenge in this whole data protection is just to even do an inventory of where is my data, what is happening to it currently, right, and those kind of things. So that becomes a big challenge of its own. We help enterprises solve that problem.
Okay.
The second is now you've discovered it, you've classified into highly confidential and public. So in your mailbox, there might be a highly confidential board communication, and the email just next to it is a lunch invitation. Right? Presumably these two are very different levels of confidentiality. Depends on who you are having lunch with.
I know.
Right?
It's a good question.
So, assuming if
it's Marco, my
yes,
co-founder,
yes.
It's not confidential.
Yes. Right? But if it's your girlfriend, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Right? So the being able to apply differential security and privacy policies to these two emails, which are both lying in the same mailbox.
Right.
It's your mailbox next to each other and so on. So that's something that we help enterprises define these differential security policies and actually apply it to these two emails which are sitting in the same mailbox. And the last but not the least is being able to monitor and control what's happening to that data. That forward-looking financial statement for a publicly listed company could be worth billions of dollars for a very short period of time, right? If you knew how a publicly listed company is going to perform, even 10 minutes in advance, that can mean a lot of money and a lot of lawsuits, right? And so on. So being
which is
able
an issue
to,
for the company, not just the person that makes the money.
Yeah, absolutely. For the person who's making the money, it's not an issue at all, right?
Right.
But for the company, it can become a big issue, investor lawsuits and so on. So we have a lot of listed companies who actually use Seclore to make sure that, for example, forward-looking financial statements don't go out before the analyst call actually happens. Right? We have a lot of enterprises who use Seclore to protect intellectual property, designs that they are sharing with fabricators who are in a different part of the world, For example,
but you have to share.
You have to share.
They're going to build it otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you stop water from flowing, it starts stinking.
Yep.
So if you stop data from flowing, it becomes useless.
Right.
I mean, the safest computer in the world is the one that you never switch on.
Right.
It's also the most useless.
Exactly.
Right. So you don't want that. You want to share, but you want to make sure that it is secure. And that's what. So that's what in the initial period I talked about security and collaboration being viewed as conflicting goals for enterprises.
Right.
Either I share or I don't share. Right. These are the two options, and we are creating a third option, which is share, but be able to control.
Got it. Perfect.
Which makes these two mutually conflicting goals be achievable together.
Sounds like a dream to me. So what's the first step? Because I think you mentioned the inventory and kind of getting a sense or a picture of what's there, how it's being accessed and used and shared perhaps even. And then you switch on the controls.
Right.
Talk to me about some of the first steps.
So the first step is usually that we focus only on large enterprises as a company.
Okay.
So our kind of worldview is restricted to large enterprises. But within that, some of the biggest challenges that we've seen enterprises is to try and boil the ocean, right? Which is to do this for the whole enterprise all at one go. And that's almost a surefire way to disaster. So what we encourage enterprises is to establish specific use cases, maybe one or two, maybe board communication could be a confidential,
came to mind,
right? Intellectual property, compliance around privacy, right, and so on. These are usually the most common use cases, and our strategy is always to encourage enterprises to budget for early quick wins, right? So if there's a specific context that is established, right, let's say confidential data needs to go to a third party, then focus on that, get it up and running in 2 weeks, a month, right, and so on. And for a large enterprise, getting anything done in that time frame is a win. Right. Get that, establish this, go from 1 or 2 use cases to 3 or 4, and then a pattern usually emerges within an enterprise. Then an enterprise-wide rollout works.
Got it.
We've seen a lot of enterprise deployments of data-centric security technology, which is the class of technologies that we belong to. Try and do an enterprise-wide inventory or an enterprise-wide data protection, and failing at it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of the quick wins, repeatable wins, and you scale that. And sounds like you have a good strategy. And I'm thrilled to meet you, Vishal, and to hear this story.
Thank you.
And
thanks for having
thanks
me.
everybody for listening to this brand story with Seclore and Vishal Gupta. Please do connect with them and the team.
Yes, absolutely.
Here at
LinkedIn.
RSA or on LinkedIn.
Good.
It's always easy wherever you are. And thanks everybody. Catch you on the next one.
Thank you.